the station tweeted out a quote that I said on the show. Quote, fandom usually comes from production. There have barely been any games played by Trey. This intense fandom that a portion of the 49er fan base seems to have, where did it come from? What is it based on? Now, some of you know Andy Liu. I do not know Andy. I've never met Andy Liu. Andy Liu has quote tweeted this quote and wrote 3 things, none of which have any fact based to them at all. So I thought I'd bring it up because this is an example of what I'm talking about, where some of you have either blindly put faith and fandom in Trey Lance without any evidence, or you don't play fair in the sandbox. And we're big people here. We're adults. I don't care. I don't need you to play fair. It is all good. You can have any opinion you want. But I do think it would be smart on the part of every human being that if you want to play with facts. Play with facts. If you bring conversations like this to your family ain't going to last. Okay? So Andy writes back. This is about Trey Lance. Year 1, he sat behind Jimmy G when it was obvious the team wasn't going to win a title with him, wasted a developmental season. How in bejesus can you say that when they were 5 quarters away from winning the Super Bowl? They went to the NFC title game with an injured starter and still made it. Still had a lead in the 4th quarter of the NFC title game. Still might actually have gone to the Super Bowl if the interception wasn't dropped. Yes, so those are all mights. But a year where they knew they weren't going to win the Super Bowl and they end up in the NFC, how on earth can you say that? They were right there. Were they not?
They were right there. And you could make the case that the 49er locker room came into that season thinking we're good enough to win the Super Bowl.
Of course they were.
Which means if you make a move that the locker room believes puts you farther away from that, you run the risk of losing your locker room.
You run the risk. And
I'm just going 21. I'm just going 21.
Yeah, his previous healthy year, they were in the Super Bowl. All right, then he writes, year 2, Kyle breaks his ankle running him up the middle 30 times a game. Thanks for your sarcasm, your exaggeration, and what Kyle would find to be the most offensive thing you could possibly say. I don't want to even get down to the debate over whether or not a coach can hurt a player in a football game. I find it laughable. Did he run him too much? If you want to have that opinion, you can. But 30 times a game, that didn't happen. Factually incorrect.
I think he did run him too much.
That's fine.
But
you can think that. But
he couldn't really do anything else consistently.
And like a coach cannot hurt a player in the NFL. Fact. Year 3, he's QB3 behind a terrible QB who everyone knows will be awful when he plays. First of all, he isn't even QB3 yet. And second of all, you have no idea what any of this is going to look like. You don't even know if Sam is going to play. You don't know if he's going to look bad when he does. This is pure speculation. So I will circle back to my original question. Does anybody want to play with facts in the sandbox? Or do you want to continue to do this? Do you want to hold on to your wild opinion that is based on clouds? You're welcome to it. It's America, knock yourself out. Where did your lockdown fandom come from? Because if you want to just speculate and say that Sam Darnold already won QB2 and he's going to stink when he goes in there, then why isn't someone allowed to fight back with their own speculation and say Trey's going to stink when he goes in there? Play with what we're actually playing with. And if not, then we know the game you're playing. We know the game you're playing. Okay? American politics has been run by this for the last 6 to 8 years. Just say whatever the hell you want to be a fact and make it a fact. And then see if you can get a bunch of crazy people all excited and chase you all over the country. Go for it. Go for it. Just know the game you're playing. It's a joke. It's a total joke.
It's all fair game for me. I think it's not a crazy take, and we talked about it earlier. It's not a crazy take to be skeptical of of Darnold if he has to get in there and win.
Skepticism is fine. Don't say it as a fact.
But there are a lot of people that think he's like, hey, if Darnold has to play, he's going to suck. Like that's like I don't think that's I don't believe it, but that's not. I don't think that's a crazy take.
I'm not hitching to that wagon, but it's no crazier of a take to say that Trey's going to stink if he goes in. It's no crazier of a take.
I would agree with that.
So
I would agree with
my
that.
question is a genuine one. I said nothing about what Trey Lance will or won't be. I said, where did this come from that so many of you seem to talk about him as if he's already this made man? And your fandom, just listen to this. Your fandom knows no boundaries. Like, I just wonder if you're the ones who can't be talked to. It's not the other way around. It's not I don't hear. Do you hear anybody say Brock Purdy's a star? It's done. Does anybody say that?
No, not specifically. But again, I think that there is a percentage of 49er fans, playing devil's advocate, that think that Brock's been gassed up a little bit too much.
Okay, that's fine.
Like whether you think, because
you can be encouraged, you can be skeptical, you can be anywhere in between.
They're like, hey, he was really good.
Hopeful.
That may not be what he actually is.
I would call it hopeful.
That may not be what he actually is.
Maybe.
And we are, and look,
we're
not doing this yet, but it could get to the point where, and I've hinted at this a couple of the other days, and we've talked about it in short periods of time, but if Brock Purdy is just average or above average, let's say, then you are going to hear from people that are like, well, if he's only above average, then you may at least ask the question, should you be developing somebody that maybe has the potential to be better at that point?
Yeah.
We're going under the premise of Brock was a stud and he's going to continue to be a stud, or at least 80% of what he was, let's say, in those 8 games.
I guess. I mean, in theory, really all he has to be is the better choice. That's really all he has to be. If Brock's only above average, I don't think that if you want to be in the now, you can hate the quarterback evaluation process for years, but in the now, all he has to be is better than Sam or Trey. And only if Trey goes somewhere else and performs better would you then say that Brock was the wrong choice, right? I mean, we're here now.
I mean, yes, but I think if Brock, I do think we get it. I mean, a lot of this is speculation, but if Brock's just average, I do think you're going to hear, not to be repetitive, but I do think you're going to hear a little bit of, well, if Brock's average, then you shouldn't have been so all in on him, Kyle. Like you shouldn't have been. You should have taken a step back, and maybe you do take because it's kind of the along the lines of the Warriors' development with the young players. I think there are some in the Warrior fan base. There's a lot actually that would have been willing to lose a few games here and there to get Kuminga farther along, to get Moody farther along, to get Wiseman to a point where he was playable at all, even in regular season games, because he was behind. He was really in a lot of ways behind the other two even. But the Warriors deemed we can't do this because we're not good enough to be even a playoff team if we do this, let alone a championship team. They got off to such a great start that the year that they won the title, it became very easy to not play Kuminga and Moody very much. Wiseman was hurt that year. But I think there's a lot of, it's like, well, if you're not gonna guarantee me that we're gonna get to the,
I know, but come on,
or he's gonna be
people.
elite, then I would rather develop.
Okay,
and you kind of can't have it both ways. But that's how fans think.
I know, but you're asking for something that's entirely impossible. What I'm hearing you say is a fan is able to tell a team, if you're not going to go all in on your young people, then you better win it all. And if you fall a little bit short,
or the guy you go to better be legit, but not just average.
But if you fall a little bit short, then we riot. I mean, that's championship or bust, and it's stupidity. That whole mindset is just dumb. Life doesn't work that way. One team wins. So what you got to ask yourself, are you willing to forego some of these projects to take a shot at a title? And if you're close, You got to be willing to accept that because not every team wins. But if you're on a short list, if you're in a Final Four or a Final Six or whatever, like you got to take that shot because you don't know how it's going to go. I mean, you telling me that the 49ers with their double-digit lead against the Rams on the road, even though it fizzled, you're telling me that you would have rather just watched Trey Lance develop?
They wouldn't have got there.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, they wouldn't have got there.
But in favor of development, you would give that run up for let's see if Trey can play?
Look, I wouldn't. I do think there's a decent chunk of 49er fans that would. When they're 3-5 in the middle of that year, and it was a game away from happening.
Well, then it would have happened.
Well, but it would have happened because Kyle would have quit on the season.
Right, but it didn't. And so he didn't.
And it
smartly.
And it shouldn't
correctly.
Agree. I don't disagree with that. But that's the part people, well, Jimmy was one game away from getting benched. Well, no, Kyle was one game away from punting the season.
Right.
But
then he won.
It was declaring, he was going to declare it. It was, all right, we're not worried about it. We're going to develop. And again, if that had happened, maybe Trey would have been farther along at the beginning of last year.
Maybe.
To where he didn't feel he had to run him as much as he had to run him or in the ways that he had to run him.
You're listening to 95.7 The Game, KGMZ FM and HD1 San Francisco, always live on the free Odyssey app, Twitch, and YouTube. We appreciate all you being there. Powered by First NorCal Credit Union. Redwood Dave, Redwood City. Hey, Dave, thanks for calling. You're on with Willard and JD. What's up?
Hey, guys. Just finishing up work over here, and I'm coming after all the fans that like Trey Lance. I do not blame Kyle Shanahan rolling the dice, taking a risk, trying to get an awesome player like Pat Mahomes, but that has not worked out. He's only thrown 400 passes in the last 6 years. He's only thrown 100 passes in the NFL. Sam Darnold has thrown, I think it's 1,700 passes or whatever it is, but he has a greater body of work. I don't foresee him overtaking Trey Lance in the remaining preseason games, but if he does, then okay, then that will be the number one, or the number two, and the number three. But Purdy has earned his right to be the starter, and until he falters, because we're a win-now team, we have to go with that. And I think the people that like Trey Lance are just uninformed and don't really watch football that much.
Your stat was about right. I just looked it up while you were talking, Redwood Dave, and thank you for the call. 1,765 career NFL attempts for Sam Darnold. You and I talked about the other day whether that's worth something as a backup.
I think it is.
I do too. I think it's dangerous to start talking about Sam Darnold as if he's pushing Brock Purdy for the starting role.
Yeah,
that's like that. That to me,
we started to hear a little of that.
I know. I'd hit the brakes on that. I got no interest in that. I think that's fair. But again, you judge Sam Darnold as what the 49ers brought him in to be, the backup. They didn't bring him in to be the starter. Now, as far as if you're a fan of I actually would hit the brakes before what Dave said. If you're a fan of Trey, you're uninformed. I don't know. You don't need to pass some sort of test to be a fan of a guy. You can be a fan of whoever you want. I'm just I'm asking where it comes from because it's not been the normal road. It's not been the normal road in sports. We usually get excited and become fans of players because they produce. And Trey hasn't even played. So if you're simply excited to see him, that's one thing, but that's not what I'm hearing. That's not where this conversation has gone. It's gotten ugly. It's gotten mean. It's gotten personal. It's gotten where people are just convinced Trey Lance is great, and Kyle and the media have ruined everything.
And
where did this come from?
And that Kyle has, in some part, botched the whole thing to where Trey isn't farther along.
I mean, you could say that he botched the pick. I don't know how Kyle. Do you believe that Kyle got in the way of Trey being further along?
At this point, I get everything that they did. I get moving up. I even get moving up without having a guy. Like, I even get moving up, you're going to get either Fields or Trey or Mac, although it was clear they were focused on Mac and Trey, and they ended up going with Trey. Like, I get, hey, that was the 1 year out of what they're thinking at the time. It's the 1 year we're going to be not good, because you're thinking, fluke 2020 got kicked out. This is the year to move up. There's all these quarterbacks. I get the logic behind, all right, we'll get a guy. He's gonna need time. We're going to keep Jimmy for one more year while he develops behind the scenes, and then we're going to give him the job. And that's exactly what the plan was, and it worked. And I think going into last year, they were comfortable maybe not not winning as many games as, I think they were comfortable with it last year.
That's what Albert Breer said.
I
can't speak to their state of mind.
Because remember, Jimmy was not part of the equation
not
at that
the beginning.
Point. So
exactly.
I think they were willing to give a year to get it maybe lined up for Trey this year to be able to be able to lead them. But then Jimmy is still around, and Trey maybe wasn't as good at camp as they would want him to be, or wasn't as far as long. He had that finger injury that screwed everything up. And so Jimmy's back. But at the moment in which Jimmy's back at that point last year, it was set up to, and I've said that, it was set up that where they were going to, Jimmy was going to end up being the quarterback because everybody in the locker room believed that they could get to the Super Bowl with Jimmy.
Did you read Kawakami's piece yesterday in The Athletic?
I did.
I think it's important for you all to know. It's important for you all to read. Tim Kawakami on The Athletic, the background of the relationship between Jimmy Garoppolo and Kyle Shanahan and how it evolved last year. And there was incredible tension between the two that you saw bear out at the end of the season, but also at the beginning. Incredible tension between the two. And to me, you read that, it proves that bringing Jimmy back was a hedge, because it was almost as if Jimmy Garoppolo and the 49ers got back in bed together against both of their wills. So simply ask yourself why they would do that. And there's zero question. They did it because they did not believe in what they were seeing from Trey Lance.
And I think there's logic in the way that they've handled all of that.
I do too.
And then you get to the point where they get to the NFC Championship game again. Purdy's hurt. A big part of the reason why Darnold was brought in, I think, was because at the time in which free agency started, both Trey Lance and Brock Purdy, you didn't know if they were going to be healthy. Now, Trey ended up getting cleared, I think, in April. It was like, all right, he's going to be fully healthy.
Yep.
Brock had his surgery pushed back to the point where the timeline ran right up against the start of the regular season, Labor Day and Week 1. So you had to get somebody, because at that point you didn't have any quarterbacks. That, on March 13th
right.
or whatever day the league year started, 15th, whatever it was, they didn't have a healthy quarterback on that date. So you have to get somebody. So they went out and got Sam Darnold, who I think you could make the case was the best option as far as somebody that's would fit the system and has played a lot of games. Played in the NFL.
They were if you believe a lot of reports, they were interested in him before.
So I get the logic to bring in Darnold at that point, because you don't know about Brock or Trey, and now you've got all three. I also understand the logic of saying Purdy's the starter based on what he did last year. That to me is an obvious. He's been the best quarterback. Those 8 games were the best quarterback play the 49ers have had in Kyle Shanahan since he's been the coach.
Yeah. Yep. You're right.
So, again, as a long and winding road to get to the point, I see the logic in how they've handled all of it. So I don't think there's really any fail at this point, other than they haven't been able to get over the top. Now, is it debatable? Can we have a conversation about should you have, I think they should have taken more time to try to develop Trey or done better due diligence to understand how far away he was.
There's absolutely a conversation.
The biggest thing is the athleticism miss, the fact that he can't run zone reads.
That's wild. That one's wild. That's what I don't
get. That's inexcusable.
I don't get it.
If you thought you were getting that guy as part of the package, then that to me is the biggest whiff.
Yeah. Yep. Jeff in San Francisco, Willard and JD. Hey, Jeff, what are you doing?
How are you?
Good.
I'm disappointed in the diatribe that it's been unfair to Trey Lance, because it's I don't know. It doesn't seem unfair. It seems more like it's just a bad break for him with being injured and getting the start last year, but it's kind of not unfair, because you look at Purdy, he took advantage of his opportunity. He won, like you guys have been saying, in a row, and I don't know. I have a hard time with the diatribe that it's unfair to Trey that he hasn't gotten a shot. There's no time left. There's none left for him to develop as a 49er quarterback. There really isn't.
Thanks, Jeff. I had someone, I won't mention who, I had a conversation with someone inside the Warriors organization recently, and they were like, you know what? I'm not like, yeah, thank you. They're like, I'm not a huge football fan, but they because this has gotten so hot in the last few days, they kind of read up on it, and they were like, it is stunning. It is stunning, the parallel between James Wiseman and Trey Lance.
Oh, yeah.
They're
Without
like,
a
the
doubt.
experience and how we felt about James is exactly what it looks like the 49ers are going through with Trey, which is that, like, we want to be a part of this, but we just don't. We don't have time. We don't have the time or space to do this anymore. And injuries and bad luck and all, they were like, it's stunning. The parallel is absolutely crazy.